is a wonderful day again here at Africa USA Radio with Reverend Q in Afternoon Drive. And as usually, as you know, we always have our best guest for your information. We have so that you can know what's going on here in Africa USA Radio and what is going on in the world. So today we are having a very special guest, and thank God for him to come on our show. I've learned a lot from him. He's a man of God from Brooklyn, New York, and I associated with him with the organization that he started, his pioneered and envisioned, called the Door, which is the door of our return. And I've learned a lot of leadership skills. I've learned a lot of his vision is very deep and great, and I know you're gonna learn a lot from him if you attach yourself with his ministry. He's also a pastor in Brooklyn. He's also a businessman. He's an entrepreneur. It's all of above, and we thank God for him. He's a great man, and I've seen in his meeting, when he was sharing the meetings. He's a man of wisdom. That's important. He's a man of wisdom, and he's married to our sister Zinzi. So we love Zinzi a whole lot. Zinzi Dillon. She's a woman of God and a very passionate with Africa, passionate with the work of God. I've very few couples that I know that work together like them. They are very exemplary. I thank God for them. His name is Pastor Dennis Dillon, all the way from New York City, and we thank God for him. How are you doing, Pastor?
I am doing very good, Reverend Quebec. It's so good to be with you on Reverend Q in Afternoon Drive. I pray God's blessings upon you. I'm not sure if I am deserving of your elaborate introduction, but I'm happy and I'm excited. And I think one of the most important things you said, obviously, is that I'm married to this dynamic woman, Dr. Zinzi Dillon. And so it's been a journey. God's been good, and I'm excited being with you and sharing with your awesome audience today.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you. It's a pleasure for us to have you. Let's just get right into it. There are very few pastors who are open-minded that I know, like you. Why I'm saying this, you are very much politically inclined, you are business inclined, entrepreneur, and very spiritual, and you all of the above, like I said. So right now I want us to start with the international issues. How did you get to be so involved internationally? I like I was saying on the intro there, the door of our return. Let's start it from there, and where you are now with it, and then you want to tell us every other thing that you are doing. I see there's a Christian Times and stuff like that. You want to tell us about all that. But let's start with the open door.
Well, absolutely. First, let me just make what I think is a key and a foundational point, and that is the mission and the mandate of the church and the people of God. I believe is to do what the Lord first instructed us to do, and that is an instruction of dominion. When the Lord said, be fruitful and multiply, he continued by saying, have dominion over the earth, dominion over the land, dominion over the air, dominion over the sea. So for me, what that translates to is the critical need for the people of God to move to that place of dominion. And without being racial, if you will, this dominion is for all humanity. But specifically addressing the fact that Africa and the global African village, as I choose to call the entire African world, we have not really seized this spiritual dominion. We have not really taken the Bible, the Quran, the Talmud, the faith books that we've all believed in one way or another, and pull and or extract it from the Word of God, the power of this dominion. So, to your question around the commitment that we have around the door of our return initiative, excuse me, and the international mandate that we have, it is really to help Africa and Africans to rise up. So we've been on
Yes.
this path around a new African renaissance. We believe that it is time for a global economic Africa renaissance. And for us, there will not be a true revival, economic revival, a
Mm.
true economic renaissance for Africa and African people across the globe in the absence of a deeper inculcation of a God consciousness and a God righteousness that really drive us from a place of purely having church or gathering in our mosque temples and synagogues, our cathedrals, if you will, to understand there is a mandate of dominion. And dominion means ownership, it means power, it means control. And certainly it is a critical path that Africa and African people needs to be on.
Wow. And we had a lot of people talking about all that. You don't just talk. You are men of action. You already been in. I remember you had a trip to to Africa. I think you touched about 3 or 4 countries. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And again, this is just one example. We've had several trips, by the way. But certainly the last trip we've had, um, last year we had a trip to Kenya.
Uh huh.
Of course, previously we've had, and I always we take business leaders, clergy leaders,
Mm-hmm.
elected leaders, because we believe that those are the three key elements within our community that we need to really move to a greater level of awakening. There needs to be a rising up, if you will, so that the dormant energy of our people can experience a new kind of resurrection. And so for us, the entrepreneurial spirit, we kind of put it in three categories. One is the entrepreneurial power and rising
Mm-hmm.
up. Number two is the ecclesiastical power and rising up. Entrepreneurial mean the business, ecclesiastical mean the church or the
Mm-hmm.
faith. And the third is the governmental power. And
Wow.
so we took politicians, we took business leaders, and we took clergy leaders on just about all these trips. Number one, exposure. Number one, understanding the awesome power of a continent and the fact that despite the power of Africa, both Africa outside of Africa and Africa within the context of our 54 or so country, not to mention the ones that are not yet as independent as they ought to be, this is just a lot of dormant power that needs to be resurrected. How much longer do we talk about the power of the resurrection before we really move to bring to a resurrected place the dormant power of our people and our continent? So that's really a part of our mandate and mission.
Uh, we've got about 6,000 listeners in the U.S. How people can get in touch and get be part of this great initiative? Do you have a registration form? They go to your website. How do they become partners with you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, my suggestion would be two things. Number one is if we go to nychristiantimes.com, and by the way, we're getting ready to upload in another couple of days the economic state of the Black world report, which is something that we put out every year. and the numbers as it relates to where we are as an African people is certainly not good, particularly when compared with where other races are, and so it is not a negative. What it is and what it ought to be, a wake up call, if you will. It should
Mm-hmm.
be just a desire to move us forward. So nychristiantimes.com is one source. The second source that I certainly want to encourage and recommend that people go to, and we're getting ready to move on the Resurgence 2023 conference that will take place in November this year, and that would be
Okay.
go to resurgence2022.com, and you'll probably find they'll find last year's information there. But again, in another couple of days or so, we're going to update that, and they'll be able to get all the information about this year's Resurgence Conference. And there's a huge delegation from across the continent that will be coming. For me, we can no longer continue to function in abeyance. We can't continue to function one group here, one group there. Our real power really has to do with our coming together, our working together, and our flowing together if we're going to have the impact that God desires for us to have.
Yeah, I've seen that you've brought in New York. You brought the politician, you involved the mayor and the pastors and clergy, like you said. I think it works great that way. So, as far as Africa is concerned, do you think African clergy, African pastors, they are on the standard that they can be shared in the platforms here in the United States?
I think there needs to be a wake up call. And so for us, the reason why we're on this clarion call mission mandate, the reason why we're so committed and devoted to really bringing these groups together, it is because we believe that to the degree that they're not, they ought to be, to the
Yes.
degree that there needs to be a rising up. We want to do everything in our power to help facilitate that rising up and to bring about that rising. So, are we
Hmm.
seeing progress? Absolutely. We're seeing great progress, and we will begin to see more. I believe that the biggest weakness for the global African community is the fact that we have allowed ourselves to function in separation for an extremely long period of time. And I saw how we came together, Africans across the globe, to bring about the end to apartheid. And I call it political apartheid because it is sad that in South Africa and Southern Africa, we're talking Zimbabwe, we're talking Zambia, we're talking Botswana,
Hmm.
with the entire region, even Mozambique, all of the Southern African region is still experiencing economic.
Wow.
Not to negate the fact that the rest of Africa is, but again, when you look at the numbers and consider the fact, as the economic state of the Black World Report will point out, that in South Africa, the per capita GDP for whites in South Africa is
Hmm.
133,000 US dollars compared to less than 3,000 for blacks. And that is sad. That is
That is
disturbing and troubling. Black unemployment in South Africa is at 37 to 38%. White unemployment in South Africa is between 5 and 6%.
wow.
That's the kind of struggles that continue to exist. And there's no way the people of God can afford to sit silent and allow this to continue when the foundation of the throne of God is justice.
Mm. So that's a desperation between the communities. So what the church could do? What must the church do to at least to try to imbalance that imbalances?
Yeah, well, I want to use the United States of America as an example because I think we in the U.S. have arguably the best example. Coming out of slavery or enslavement ourselves, suffering well over 400 years of brutal chattel slavery, coming out of Jim Crowism, coming out of suppression and repression and oppression in so many areas. As we're coming out of it, the church led the way to the civil rights movement. The church
Mm-hmm.
led the way to bring an end to many of the injustices that our communities have been experiencing. And the church really got to the place where they begin to insist around equal employment opportunities, equal participation in corporate growth and corporate development, proper presence in the corporate boardrooms. The church has played such a critical role in all of this. So, for me, what the church in South Africa must do is to begin to do similar things, to be activists around economic redemption. I think we have a tendency to grow comfortable with having some level of political freedom, failing to recognize that in the absence of true economic freedom, there is no true freedom. Because again, go back to the command of God: have dominion over your land, the lithospheric realm, your gold, your everything within the earth. We call the lithosphere. Everything within the earth, gold, diamond, ore, uranium, lithium, all the form of natural resources. The Word of God says, have dominion over it. Have dominion
Mm-hmm.
over the atmospheric realm. Everything that moves in the atmospheric era, every phase of it, have dominion over it. And we're failing to recognize the amount of resources and power that's in the earth, that's in the air, that's in the waters, the hydrospheric. So until the people of God move to greater control of the lithosphere, the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, and even to whatever degree there are resources that we can capture from the photosphere, the light sphere within our entire world, we're not at the place of power that we ought to be. And that is a mission and a mandate that the church must lead. And by the way, when I speak of the church, I am talking about the gathering of the people
Of the same.
around faith. Whether so this now applies to all other communities that are gathering and focus on the spiritual development and the spiritual revival of our people.
That is deep. That is deep. Uh, when you organize the trips to Africa, do you have a challenge to encourage African Americans to travel to Africa, or it's easy? Why I'm asking this question? I used to organize trips for clergies to South Africa because that's where I'm inclined. I always have more white uh, American Caucasians to partake in those trips. I had challenges with African American. What is the problem there? Do you foresee anything, or it's just my imagination?
I don't know. I don't think it's your imagination at all. I think it's really at the end of the day, who we have access to, the people we have access to.
Okay.
That's number one. Number two, very, very clearly, it's education.
Okay.
There's been so much miseducation and so much diseducation, if I could create a word, or faulty education. There has been so much brainwashing that the Western media, the American media to a great degree, and the systems, if you will, have so portrayed Africa in a negative light that a lot of, particularly our people, have had a perception that they only go to Africa to do missionary work. They go to Africa to help struggling Africans, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
To recognize the power that's there, that some of your best tourist attractions and sites beyond going to safaris and so forth are right there on the continent of Africa. Some of your best resources, opportunities, connection, some of your strongest and most powerful leaders, men and women, faith, business, technology, right here on the continent. So as we re-educate, our people are coming into a different and a better understanding. So the reality for us is I just say the word, and there's a lot of people lining up. I can't tell you how many people have already lined up. And Reverend Dillon, when is your next trip to Africa? They all want to come. They all want to participate.
Wow.
Finding that as folks are coming to Africa, folks are literally Africans in America or African Americans,
Mm-hmm.
for them. As they set foot on the soil, many of them are in tears because they're recognizing finally after all these challenges, I am setting my feet back on the motherland, the land from which my ancestors came.
Okay.
It is an exciting time and certainly a time of renewal and revival for Africans in America who certainly see the need to journey back to the motherland more and more. And believe me, they're just, we will never be able to keep up. So as Africa opens up more, and as more of Africa strengthen their commitment the way we've seen Ghana have done, particularly around the year of our return agenda, we're going to see a great revival of more Africans who have been in America and the Americas and other parts of the world for generations who have never really been to the motherland, journeying back. And a part of what Africa on the continent has to do has to stop the concept, the faulty perception that the African diaspora are only Africans who have migrated in their understanding, uh, and that would probably in the United States and the Americas call continental Africans, but the diaspora include those Africans who've been removed by slave ships 400 and some odd years ago, or 500-600 years ago, including those Africans who have been in America for thousands of years, going back to the time of the Aborigines and the original Indian, because at the end of the day, Africa is the cradle of human civilization. So every human being somehow have some connection back to this central place, in the world. Africa is the center of the world. Obviously, that was where God started creation.
Today I just heard the sad news about the passing of Harry Belafonte, a very great man and a lover of Africa and a lover of Africans. He was at some point a financer for Nelson Mandela, first black president elected in South Africa. What would you say? Have you ever have a knowledge about him? What would you say on that?
Well, absolutely. We certainly offer our condolences to his entire family. Harry Belafonte is one who I've had the privilege of knowing, meeting. I remember once we were sitting beside each other on a plane ride to Jamaica, where obviously we know he is from the
Yes.
island of
Mm-hmm.
Jamaica, and he has remained very committed to that island. He served all the way until his death as the honorary chair of the American Foundation for the University of the West Indies, an
Wow.
organization that I have also served in some capacity with over the years as well. So we're grateful to his for his life. Thanks be to God that he's lived, I think, 96 years
96.
that the Lord has blessed him to live. All that he has done, all of his work, he's certainly one of those strong advocates for the continent of Africa, and so we salute him for his life. We certainly want to just honor him and give God thanks for his life and the commitment that he had, yes, to South Africa, to the struggle to bring an end to apartheid,
Very
and
committed.
in so many other ways. He was really one of the civil rights icon who supported almost every major civil rights initiative, both here in the U.S. as he did on the continent, as he did in Jamaica, and other parts of the Caribbean as well. So our condolences to his family, indeed.
Yeah, I had a opportunity to meet him. He was honored by Shared Interest, where Dr. Zinzi was one of the speakers not long ago, and uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I get a chance to meet him. He's a very great man of God, and we want to pass our condolences to the family and all the loved ones, all the supporters, and we thank God for him. Yeah. What do you have you heard anything about Sudan? What can what do you think Sudan need to be done about that? There's a war going on in there. I was understanding they were trying to evacuate Americans, and the South Africans have tried to evacuate South Africans out of there too.
Yeah, it is really sad what is happening in the Sudan. The years of struggle between Sudan, South Sudan. Not to leave out as we move a little east to the Horn of Africa. Not to exempt the difficult civil conflict that's also taking place in Ethiopia. And I know the first thing that I, as a preacher, would encourage everyone to do is to pray.
Pray.
But certainly we need to look at what else it is that we must do. What are some of the other tangibles that we can do? I'm still trying to study and evaluate all that's going on and what our response ought to be. But I think for us, one of the things we just finished the State of the Black World conference that just took place thanks to the leadership of Dr. Ron Daniels and all the others, Dr. Julius Garvey, the son
Okay.
of Marcus Messiah Garvey, and all the others who were a part of this initiative. And by the way, both Dr. Ron Daniels, Dr. Julius Garvey, George Fraser, the best-selling New York Times author of Success Runs in Our Race, Click, and a couple others. We were all there. The former Prime Minister for Jamaica, P.J. Patterson, um, and others who participated in the State of the Black World Conference. And yes, Sudan is a part of the conversation we're having. So we'll obviously do some follow-up dialogue and talk through what are the tangibles. It's I just can't put my finger yet on how do we get many of the African leaders and nations to take a different perspective. I think what continues to plague much of Africa is the fact that the colonial masters and these colonial powers are still so strong in terms of their influence in the continent. And until we break the stranglehold of the slave masters, their economy, their influence, their political influence, we're going to continue to struggle for a little while longer. I'm hoping not much longer, Reverend Hewitt. But for me, that's really what's going to be needed for us to get beyond this, and for Africa to truly be independent in its operation. And most countries, whether it's the Caribbean or it's Haiti, also in the Caribbean, or it's Africa, there's still such a huge influence by those, colonial powers, that stranglehold has to be broken. And I see some of this stranglehold in the Sudan as well.
Yeah, yeah. I also think we don't understand democracy the way it works. And another thing that is killing African leaders is corruption.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, that need to be taken care of.
Yeah, yeah, my perspective on the whole corruption piece is probably just a tad bit different, because there's corruption everywhere.
Everywhere.
There's just as much corruption in America than we have in any African country. Just as much corruption in Britain as or the UK as we have in any other country. In
Mm,
France, in fact, they've got more corruption. It's a different kind of corruption in a lot of ways. But I think the fact that we've not been, you know, we've been far out of the Berlin Conference, um, maybe 140 something years removed from the Berlin Conference. But the reality is that that infiltration has had its impact, and eventually I think it's going to fizzle out. My point is, most African countries, we're just 40 to 50, 60 years out of being under the dominion and the power of these power forces. So I think
mhm.
now, as we are slowly moving into our own, it's gonna fizzle out, because we're just coming into ourselves. So a good example would be, just take a starving person who've been starving for years, and all of a sudden you come into the fullness of food,
Mm.
and you're just grabbing everything, and you're eating and you're eating and you're eating, and you're not even recognizing that there are other people who need to eat as well, because you're so now focused in, man, I haven't had anything for so long.
Mm,
So I kind of think I'm not using that as an excuse for the corruption or as an
mhm,
excuse for some of what's happening, but I'm making the point that what we need to do is to now recognize that we're only 60 years into our freedom. We go back to some of the earlier independent nations like Nigeria or Ghana,
yeah.
uh, some of the later ones, Zimbabwe, South Africa,
South
probably the
Africa.
latest of the most recent of them all. And
Mhm,
it took the Europeans thousands of years to come out of the place of the kind of corruption that Africans are now in.
mm,
If we go back and look at the history, the corruption that those nations had, that those political powers have had, was deep,
was
deeply
the
entrenched. And those years went on. If you go back and understand the feudal crown, that era, that age, the fightings, the bickerings, the rape that took place in those countries by those leaders, as they're taking power and control, it is far more than the little that we've seen in Africa. Now, I'm not minimizing um, the fact that there should be no corruption. But I don't want us as a race of people to start thinking that Africa and African leaders are so corrupt and the others aren't, when they've experienced thousands of years of corruption with enough experience to make the corruption more subtle. And the little bit of time we have, we're slowly moving into our own. So we pray that the much of what we're seeing in Africa will come to an end soon. And we all need to work and do our part. It comes to an end soon. And we're slowly moving into hopefully a proper system of true democracy. And I pray to a great degree a level of theocracy where there's a God governance and a
God
God
covenant.
and a God rulership that will facilitate where Africa ought to be in the next hopefully 20 to 50 years.
So you're telling me that we need to be patient.
I think I'm saying to us, we have no choice but to be patient. I'm certainly saying to us that we should not be too hard on ourselves.
Okay. Okay.
um, allow this phase to fizzle out. I am confident that this phase that we're in is a temporary phase that's going to fizzle out.
Well, back to other questions. Uh, do you think if I bring pastors, African pastors to African American churches, do you think they will be they'll be accepted in their podiums, in their pulpits, as called ministers of the gospel, or they would think that they still need to learn some of the things here?
I think they will be accepted. I think they are being accepted. I have seen
Okay,
some level of acceptance already. If we go back to Bishop Adiosa,
Adios. Yeah.
um, he's been in so many American pulpits all across the globe. We go to Bishop. I'm trying to remember the name of this dynamic bishop in Zimbabwe. I've actually been to a couple of churches in the U.S.
Okay,
And hear him speak. His name slipped me in the moment, and I apologize for that. But we've
okay,
seen so many others who've actually been here with great acceptance.
okay. That's okay.
In. So where the weakness is not so much the pulpit exchange.
Mm-hmm.
It is creating the linkage and the alliances. And I think that's where the weakness is. That's where we've been heavily focused. That's why we do these connections and we're linking. So many of the pastors that I have linked to America are now ministering in pulpits in America and vice versa. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so we're seeing this. We need to obviously see more of it. What has happened in the church world, and I talk about this all the time, and that is because much of the so-called missionary endeavors, and if we understand the evolution of um, uh, of missionaries coming to Africa, we will obviously find another dilemma because much of the missionaries to Africa were more so white ministers, white churches from across Europe, from across America, who were going more so with a social service agenda. We're going to help. We're going to, these poor, pitiful people, let's go to Africa and support them. And so they do much of the missionary work. So we've seen a greater linkage and partnering between the Africans from the continent coming and aligning with some of the Caucasian churches and pastors. And in fact, you'll definitely have more, African, migrants who will find a white church or a Caucasian church in America than they will find a black church in America. And that is the reason. It's just the process of how the missionary endeavors has worked. So what we're committed to doing is to really help to make sure that more African Americans, Africans in America, more Caribbean Americans or Caribbeans from the Caribbean are also making that journey so that the kind of linkages that needs to be strengthened between Africans in the diaspora or Africans outside of Africa and Africans on the continent can find greater synergy and more partnerships.
Another challenge Africa is having right now, but I think it's phasing out a little bit, is these false prophets and false preachers, and that give a stigma of some sort. What do you think about it?
Well, I have to be 100% fair, and I'm happy that it's phasing out. I'm not sure to what degree it will phase out, because the Bible does talk about false prophets shall
Yeah.
come and shall be among you. But the reality, Reverend Quebec, is that much of this is learned behavior. And they've actually learned this mostly from their European counterparts, from their white American counterparts. I don't want to call names, but the amount of these popular, prominent so-called evangelists who have actually staged healings,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
people in wheelchairs who are not really crippled or able to walk, and said they healed them. We've obviously seen much of that has played out on the American stage. We've had that at Madison Square Garden in New York City. We've had that
Wow.
all across the United States of America by a lot of these prominent ministers here, and it has been proven. So it's learned behavior, no doubt. But the Bible said that false prophets shall arise and that they shall deceive many. The word of God even said, if it were possible, they would deceive the very elect. So it's real. I keep praying and encourage us to also pray and to work for healing to take place within the church. I believe that the Africa revival, and I'm believing for Africa revival, and I want to be very clear about the Africa revival. Any Africa revival will have a great economic impact. So this Africa revival, because we have a tendency as church people to kind of think that a revival is an event that takes place in a church. But I'm talking about the real Africa revival, a movement that's going to
Movement.
create economic transformation, growth, development, healing, restoration, positive, progressive, nations with good, strong, positive, faith-guided, God-led leadership. It is coming to the entire continent of Africa. More businesses that are owned by Black Africans all across the landscape of the continent, all 54 countries, and plus Western Sahara and some of the other areas that have not been truly liberated yet. So I see this, but this kind of revival is going to take the people of God, Africans, fervent in prayer, truly committed, and most importantly, we have to break away. And I know this is a difficult statement. I need everybody to hear me. We have to break away from the faulty teaching, from the Eurocentric perception we've had of Christianity, and begin to get back to Christianity as it ought to be, righteousness as it ought to be, a God consciousness as it is ordained to be, and most importantly, for us to really be endowed and empowered by the Holy Spirit, so that we are guided by the Spirit of God and not guided by the theology of Roman Catholicism or the theology of Anglicanism or the theology of Methodism or Presbyterianism or many of the other theologies that we've allowed to shape even how we function. Because within all of those theological concepts, there are truths and there are errors. And oftentimes we Africans gravitate more deeply to the errors, and we perpetuate those, and it puts us or keeps us in a place of subjugation and subjection. And to a great degree, it is mostly in faith and religion that white supremacy continue to exist and disempower Africans and Black people in America and around the globe.
Your wisdom, it's unmatched. Your spiritual roots, it's amazing. I'm learning as I'm interviewing. I hope people they're gonna be learning a lot. That is why I really ask you to come in and share, because I knew that we're gonna have a depth of wisdom, not only wisdom, but also spiritual insight. I appreciate you, Pastor. I appreciate it so much for your time. We need to do this again.
Absolutely. Whenever you're ready, just let me know, man. I'll be
We need to do this again. I'm really excited. I'm really happy. It's just that the time don't allow us to go further and further, but we can do this again. Thank you so much for coming. What can you share with the listeners and the viewers about what's going on with your ministry, Christian Times, Rise Church, and all that? Yeah, share us with a lot of listenership in Queens, Manhattan. They might want to stop by in the church and see you and visit you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we certainly encourage them to come. We're on a path around a global ministry, and thanks to COVID-19, it has done some positives. I hate the impact that it has had on the lives of so many people, and the devastation it has caused. The many people that we have lost, many friends, many members of our own congregation, members of my staff who we've lost as a result of COVID. But I just want to speak to the fact that it provides opportunities as well. We always have to look for the glory in the tragic story. And I think one of the glories is while all of a sudden we begin to see things differently. And so we started this Rise Church Global. And so our gathering now includes people from across the continent, and we're using this to really help to create that bridge that we talked about earlier, and linkage and this new spiritual movement that's going to facilitate a new Africa globalization. That's going to really spark this renaissance. We can be reached certainly at Rise Church as well. That will be Rise Church New York, Rise RISE Church New York at risechurch.com. It's been so long.
Yeah.
You'll find us if you go to risechurchnewyork.com. I think is the direct website there, but certainly the other website, NY Christian Times, nychristiantimes.com is our website for where you get the reports, you get all the information, the newspaper, and you can certainly follow us there. And again, those who definitely want to reach out to me can kind of reach me as well. Publisher at nychristiantimes.com. Publisher at nychristiantimes.com. And yes, we want to follow up with you, sir. Let us know. We'll be back again to share with the people of God. But certainly keep up the good work and all that you're doing on RevQ, and we pray God's blessings upon you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, keep on blessing and praying for us, and we're gonna keep on praying for you, and we're gonna meet sometime soon. I'm in New York anyway, but we'll see sometime.
Look forward.
God bless you, my pastor. Thank you so much.
God bless you. Stay well.
Thank you. That was it for today with our guest, Pastor Dillon from Brooklyn, New York, and we thank God for him. He's a hardworking man, and he loved the Lord, as you have seen it sharing. It was a blessing to have him. We thank God for him, and keep on listening at Africa USA Radio. If you have know a friend who don't have the app yet, tell them to download our app at Africa USA Radio, africausa.com. And if you have an iPhone, you can also listen to the our website, africausa.radio.com, live. You can listen to this interview. Also, tune in at our Africa USA Unity Events YouTube page and Africa USA Unity Events radio and TV Facebook page. We're also on Instagram, Africa USA Unity Events. And then you can also meet me on my page, personal page, Quebec Mlamuli Miya, Facebook page. God bless you. We will see you soon, and we'll be talking to you with another guest, special guest. God bless.